from an American adversary like Russia is executed, and why so many of these crucial national security-related agencies, the Pentagon, DHS, as Natasha broke today, the Department of Energy section in charge of our nuclear stockpile. How are we so vulnerable, even if they're on the unclassified systems, which is our understanding at this point? How does an attack like this work, and why are we still so vulnerable to it?
Right. So first, I'm glad you're referring to it as a cyber attack, because let's make no mistake, our nation is under attack right now, and it appears to be ongoing, by the way. How does something like this happen of this magnitude, where 300,000 clients of a private company are potentially impacted, including the most sensitive agencies in our government? It's because the Russians were able to find a single point of failure in our supply chain, meaning that this product, that comes from SolarWinds, is a network management product that's used by too many, quite frankly, of our government agencies and too many of our top telecommunications companies, 10 of which were compromised as far as we know so far. So it's a larger issue, Nicole, of supply chain management. And you asked whether or not this is an intelligence failure. I'm going to take it a step further. It is a national defense failure. This is the defense of our nation and its systems, and failure to oversee our supply chain and in a form of allowing one company to service so many of our government agencies. The Russians found that weakness, they exploited it, and we're still learning the extent of the damage. And what has Natasha reported? That now our nuclear energy components have been impacted by it. And one of the words that jumps out in her reporting to me is damage. So we've heard previously that the systems have been monitored, that emails were watched, that there's been penetration. Today we're hearing damage at the Department of Energy. That's highly malicious activity. And what are we hearing from the agency responsible, partly for securing our cyber resources? That they're overwhelmed by this. So we have a president who's been diverting money, billions of it, to build a wall, changing personnel at the top of the Pentagon, and we've not heard word one about the plan or strategy to respond to this ongoing attack.
Frank, I've got one more question for you. And before I turn to the Russia relationship with Donald Trump specifically, I just want to point out that Tom Bossert, the individual we quoted, is an ex-Homeland Security official. Chris Krebs, who we've referenced, is an ex-chief of the agency responsible for these defenses. Elizabeth Newman, who appears on our show, is also an ex-official of the Homeland Security Department. There have been so many people purged from the national security agencies. Gina Haspel is reportedly fearing for a potentially firing on her part. There's been incredible turnover and turmoil at the Pentagon just since the election. I wonder if you can just offer some analysis, Frank Figliuzzi, of the impact on sort of dealing with and staying on offense against an adversary like Russia at a time when their leadership is very stable and ours is in constant churn and chaos.
So look, our adversaries are watching us right now and saying that no one's in charge. Literally, from the Oval Office down throughout the intelligence community, through the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency and onward. And we need, I know that we've got to deal with this crisis right now, but just like 9/11, we're going to need congressional oversight and inquiries to figure out what in heaven's name has happened, who is in charge, where did the failures occur, and we need oversight and coordination like never before of our cyber resources, because cyber is the new battlefield. It's the new warfare. We can't think in military terms anymore. This is the warfare and battlefield, and it means that Joe Biden on day one is going to be fighting another kind of virus, the cyber kind.
Peter Baker, I want to get to you. You have an incredible body of reporting on all the incidents, a few of them we referenced at the top of the show, of Donald Trump's unwillingness, flat-out refusal, even in the face of advice from John Bolton or H.R. McMaster or Dina Powell, to be strong or stand up to Vladimir Putin. There's not a single example of him doing so. But I first want to talk about breaking news. The FDA has just recommended that a second coronavirus vaccine be approved for emergency use. That's the Moderna vaccine. Your colleague Annie Carney tweeted earlier today, Peter Baker, that it's unclear if the White House has a message or a strategy on the vaccine. She pointed out that the vice president will be vaccinated on camera, and then that the first lady said that if she were vaccinated, she wouldn't tell anybody. Your sense, just from the White House beat of this news, is this still something that they're pushing on? A week ago, they were pushing on the FDA to approve the Pfizer vaccine. By this week, it's a muddied message on the vaccine front.
Yeah, look, they're still pushing for it to be approved and distributed. No question about this. Moderna vaccine is a lot like the Pfizer one that's already been approved. There's some differences in their storage and handling and so forth, but the basic structure of these vaccines, as I understand it, is similar. So if you get one or the other, you're going to be pretty equally covered. And what you see in Vice President Pence is what you would normally expect out of a White House in this situation, where the leader of a country or a leader of the country demonstrates personally that he is going to get this vaccine because he trusts it and he believes that he should encourage every American to get it to the extent that they're able to get it. Now, obviously, most Americans aren't yet able to get it. They'll still be a few months away before they're allowed to. But you're right. The muddled message comes in, for instance, what we should do with the White House staff. There was this plan to go ahead and give vaccines to senior officials in the White House. My colleagues reported on it, and then the president immediately reacted to that with a tweet saying, no, we're not going to do that. Because I think he looked at it as if we were saying that somehow the powerful people around him were jumping the line ahead of everyday Americans. But in fact, there's a longstanding continuity of government concern about making sure people who are running the government, for the very reasons we've been talking about. We're in the middle of a Russia cyber attack. You don't want people to be worrying about getting sick. You want them to be focusing on the external threat. But the president's kind of been back and forth on whether or not people in his own administration should be getting it on the early side, whether people in Congress should be getting on the early side. I think this is kind of an unclear picture. Maybe the vice president will help illuminate that tomorrow morning when he does get it himself.
And we're going to have full coverage of the second vaccine being recommended for approval by the FDA later in our hour. But I want to turn to you, Peter, on this our lead story, the cyber attack from Russia. Your coverage has been scathing, frankly, of how defenseless the United States government was in the face of this attack. Is there any indication that anyone in the White House is holding daily meetings to figure out to assess the damage, as Frank is talking about, the impact, the harm that's been done, and to discuss options for retaliation against Russia?
Yeah, well, Robert O'Brien, the president's national security advisor, cut short a trip to Europe to come home and convene meetings on this very subject to try to get a handle on just how bad this is, how extensive this is, what they can say about this origin, and what the consequences are. We don't know yet what they're considering as a possible response. And we haven't heard from the president yet about this. He has been basically quiet about it, but not just in person, but on Twitter. Of course, he's usually pretty willing to say things on Twitter when he sees news on television, yet this one he's been pretty quiet on. Now, that may just be caution. I think other presidents might also be cautious at first, trying to make sure they understand the situation before they, engage in a hostile kind of battle of rhetoric, if not actual consequences. But there is such a pattern here of a president who has been reluctant, as you showed in those videos, to say anything critical of Vladimir Putin, anything critical of Russia, even as his own administration does take action below him, without him, talking about it. There have been sanctions. There have been, diplomats pulled over the last 4 years. But it's never something that the president himself wants to take ownership of publicly, unless, of course, he's being attacked, in which case he says he's been very tough on Russia. So it's been a mystery. We haven't heard him talk yet about this cyber attack, much like the bounties that were reported to be offered in Afghanistan. There was no response back then. A lot of people are going to be waiting to see whether this president, in the 30 days or so he has left, will take action to say this is not acceptable, and we do consider this to be an act of hostility against our country.
Natasha, an act of hostility against our country. And as Peter was talking, I pulled this up. Trump has tweeted 45 times today. And I have a different impression of Russia and why he hasn't responded. And it's not that he's cautious. I haven't observed Donald Trump to be particularly cautious about anything. But I wonder if you're picking up an appetite for a daily, in a White House, when the country is attacked, there is normally an emergency war footing that the White House moves to. It was certainly my experience in the White House after 9/11, but also after intelligence shows an imminent threat. This is an ongoing attack, in the words of Donald Trump's own former Homeland Security advisor, Tom Bossert. It's the way Frank Figliuzzi described it. What are you hearing in terms of the footing that national security officials would like to be on to respond to an ongoing cyber attack from Russia?
Yeah, well, obviously, they would prefer that the White House be a little bit more transparent about their response and about how they are going about coordinating with the different agencies and trying to contain the damage that we've been seeing uncovered over the last couple of days with regard to the hack on all of these federal agencies.